So, in thinking about the readings and the issue of social justice in education this week, um, I was really puzzling over the first foundational question of critical pedagogy for music education, which was, who am I? And in reading Lila Bartolome's article, the first thing, one of the things that really caught my attention was the interview she cited done by Lisa Delpit of an African American student who was in a classroom with a white female teacher, and how that student talked about that the student didn't feel like they learned anything because the teacher was like, well, you have to think creatively, you have to express yourself, and the student was like, well, I am already good at that. In fact, I'm probably better at it than you are. Was like the impression I got from it, and that was really interesting for me because a lot of the work I've been doing for this class is focused around creative empowerment and the really the importance of that, and the student is asking for the polar opposite of that, and to imagine that it's likely that I'll be in context where students are better at coming up with ways to improvise and express themselves than I am, and if that's what I'm trying to teach them, that's kind of a problem. That's problematic. So that was one thing that really kind of caught my attention. Another thing, this was over on page 416, was that she talks about how these like empowerment practices that are using student knowledge to frame curriculum and to frame lessons and form instruction um, tend to take place, she says, often in italics. These practices take often in classrooms where students speak a language and possess cultural capital that more closely matches that of the mainstream, whereas those in what she said, the subordinated populations, that's not the case. Now, one thing I wish he had talked about more as to why that is the case, but I think because why that is the case is a really fascinating question, and it gets to the heart of a lot of things that Masato was talking about. So, in the forward to Masato's book, he talks about the liberal colonizer, someone who, and he talks about this. Let me try and find it here. The real issue is to understand one's privileged position in the process of helping, and not to, on the one hand, turn into a type of missionary paternalism, and on the other hand, limit the possibilities of creation of structures that lead to real empowerment. And so I think that this is one of the key issues with the idea of social justice is who am I, and how can I operate in a context without becoming this liberal colonizer who exercises this missionary paternalism. And I think those I don't say to kind of turn those phrases into cliche, because I think they're really important phrases, but it's like I'm a white guy, and I come from upper middle class. I've privilege of a great education, and I had a safe environment to grow up in, and I'm Christian, and so it's like it's very hard for me to imagine the ways in which I am not just the epitome of the dominant ideology, of the white middle upper class man, who has all the privileges. And so it's like, how do I operate authentically and meaningfully in a way I can engage people, so that it's not patronizing, and coming up with ways to do that, it makes it very easy, because of all the difficulties that surround that issue. It makes it easy to fall into that mindset of the neoliberalism that Freire talks about. Just this idea is like, well, I'm part of the dominant ideology, so I can try, but it probably won't do that much. Now, I know it's never it's not a good opinion to have, but even so, it's so, there's so many things working against that. It's just like so many things, ideas that I'm not, quite aware of yet. And so, I don't know, it's very difficult. So I guess one of the things I was really examining this week as I was thinking about things is really two questions. One actually comes from a movie that I saw called I Heart Huckabees. One of the characters kind of is going through this like existential crisis, and he comes across the question of how am I not myself, and he's like really puzzles over that question, and I think that's not an inapt question for us to puzzle over as well, as you know, how am I not myself? You know, how am I not Christian, and how am I not white, and how am I not, you know, upper class, and you know, to what extent am I going to, you know, give those things up in order to help those people who are less fortunate and those who are oppressed, and just even just to avoid reproducing, you know, oppressive ideologies. You know, as Masato says here at the end of the forward again, he says, the liberal colonist contradiction is no different from that of many white liberal educators, particularly in risk and prevention programs, who proselytize about empowering minorities while refusing to divest their class and whiteness privilege, a privilege that is often left unexamined and unproblematized, and that is often accepted as a divine right. To do otherwise is to willfully destroy one's class and color supremacy, a difficult task, as Albert Memmi has accurately stated in his discussion of the liberal colonizer. Quote, he vaguely hopes to be part of the future young nation, but he firmly reserves the right to remain a citizen of his native country. He evokes the end of colonization, but refuses to conceive that this revolution can result in the overthrow of his situation and himself, for it is too much to ask for one's own end, even if it be in order to be reborn another. And that's really, I'm having a lot of trouble finding that hard to swallow. Is like how can we engage, you know, in an empowering pedagogy for those who are less fortunate than we are? Like, how can I even walk into a classroom full of you know, students who are of a different race and economic and social economic status than I am? How can I even stand in front of them? I don't even have to open my mouth, and they, you know, it's like they already have legitimate qualms to make against me. It's like, what am I doing in front of teaching them? And so, you know, I don't have a citation for this next thing, but I wish I did. I've heard it said, it's like, you know, well, we should only have black teachers teaching black students. We should only have white teachers teaching white students. And it's like, to a certain extent, that deals with a lot of the potential problems, especially with this idea of the colonialist and this idea of paternalism and patronage, and just this idea of the idea of when you're trying to help out, you know, people in a lower socioeconomic status or in a subordinated population, the danger that you'll become this colonialist who says, well, I'm going to help you out so you can be more like me, rather than I'm going to help you out so you can be more like you. It's easy to say that, but it's so fantastically difficult, and it's just, like I said earlier, it makes it so easy to fall into that trap of the neoliberal mindset. It's like, well, I can't even try, so I might as well just go teach a classroom full of middle class white kids, and you know, that I can be successful. But then, you know, you're just contributing to the reproduction of what Bartolome cites when she says, you know, that these empowering practices that use student knowledge only occur where you have the white, you know, middle class teachers who have had the benefit of an education like the one that I have the benefit of of obtaining, and have had exposure to this kind of literature and this kind of scholarship, and think about these kind of things, but they just don't have the courage, I suppose. Is courage the right word? I don't know. But it's very difficult. It's challenging to think about, and I'm not sure. I don't know if I could do it. You know, I don't know the way I would approach it. You know, it's like, how could I go teach in a public school in Manhattan? Like, how would I do that? Would it be possible to to make a meaningful impact on the lives of those kids, because my identity, like my whole experience of who I am as a person, is so vastly different from those kids. And how could I even try? Is and Ferrari would say, well, don't be a coward, just go ahead and try it. You do your best, and you just have to continually be aware of the differences, and the larger the differences, the more difficult it is, but such is the way of the world.